Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. My seat is in full upright position. I'm all buckled in. Window shade is all the way up. Here we are now, moving on to the tarmac. But suddenly we come to a stop. It's a slight pause. Suddenly, the engines have this high-pitched whining noise. They're revving up. We're moving from a stationary position to being pushed back in our seat, running down the runway at around 300 kilometres an hour in no time at all. Whew. This thing is nuts. I can tell you, I've been on a few roller coaster rides in my life, but I don't think even Formula One drivers have this much adrenaline and speed thrills. Inevitably, there's only one place we can go from here. Up. The ground moves away from us so rapidly, and I watch as cars form like a trail of tiny little ants. Buildings look like little Lego blocks. This one thing is really fun. Even the whole journey part and the landing as well. Well, the bonus is when the experience is over, you're in a new destination that you've never been before as well. Yep, I have to do this again and again and again, as often as I can for the rest of my life. That was then. That was when I was a kid, taking my very first flight. For me, it was love at first flight. And I was a lucky boy too. I got to keep doing it over and over again. Always going to some new place, and I was looking forward to the plane trip as much as I was looking forward to the holiday itself. I loved it so much that I was on the computer nearly every day, playing the flight simulator, learning about aircraft, different engines, and even dreaming of becoming a pilot. So how can someone with so much passion and love for something suddenly do a 180 and develop an irrational, uncontrollable fear of it? Well, we are all human, I guess. It's natural to have fears. For the people around me, they thought it was a silly one. In fact, always comments of, what are you worried about flying for? You don't know how safe it is. Descended upon me. But then again, there are some people in this world that for some reason have this fear about chopsticks. True story. Now, I think that in itself is a little bit silly. But then again, they can't seem to overcome that fear, so am I really that different? Now I can pinpoint to you exactly when this fear began. Ironically, it was after the 9/11 events. But getting in a plane that might be hijacked was far from my fear at all. In fact, just 2 months after those events, I had an overseas trip booked, and I wasn't worried about the plane trip at all. But what I can tell you is that the part that I was flying with on that trip herself had a very nervous fear of flying. And I guess somehow her fears manifested themselves into me. I mean, I was fine with the trip on the way over there, but somewhere in between the holiday and boarding the plane to come home again, I had this new fear flying around inside my head. And now I had to face it while I was trapped in the very thing that I'd become scared of for the next 8 hours. And I can tell you, I can remember vividly that 8 hours of my life. Silently praying, please, anyone, just get this plane on the ground, get it back there safely. And the fact that the plane had a turbulence the whole journey didn't help at all. But what was I so afraid of? What was I fearing? Well, for me, it became a trust issue. I simply just not trust the plane that the parts or the wiring would do their job and that it would stay in together in one piece and while you're in the air. And I also had problems with control. Yeah. Here I was, a passenger, at the full mercy of some pilot I don't know. And I have no control over him or how he handles the plane. I just have to have the faith that he knows what he's doing and gets there in one piece. But also I justified my fear. Because everyone knows here that sometimes, yeah, planes crash. So all that did was make my fear real. From this point, it just got worse. While my dreams of being able to travel were just flying out the window. I forced myself to fly a couple of times for work. Yeah. First time I did it was okay, I was scared, but the second time it just became unbearable. I was worried. The days leading up to the flight, I just couldn't concentrate, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think. All I could think about was I don't want to get on a plane, there's no way I'm not doing it. And I did, I got there, but then the same thing on the way back at the airport to try and go home again. I was telling myself, no, I was convincing myself that there was no way I was going to get on that plane. Up to the point where I was this close to actually hiring a rental car out to drive up from Sydney. Even though at the time I knew how crazy that sounded. Moving on from there, I just kept getting worse and worse. I was now getting restless with my friends and family that were flying, fearing for their safety. I had a partner who was flying back from overseas, and I remember that night I didn't sleep at all, not 1 week. Why? Because every 10 minutes I was on the internet, just checking to make sure that the flight still said it was in the air. Now here's where the story is, just plain ridiculous. Because I landed myself a job with one of the major airlines. One of the perks of the job was, can anyone guess? Free flights. And how can anyone say no to that? It'd be stupid, wouldn't it? So I said, right, this must be a sign, there's got to be an opportunity, I can overcome this. So I booked myself a flight, 1 hour, just an easy one, just to Sydney. It was a good idea at the time, I thought. But unfortunately I couldn't go through with it, and I ended up driving instead. But I was determined that I had to get through this. So I tried again, I booked a flight to Melbourne. I gave myself a good reason that I had to go there by having tickets to a show that I couldn't refund. And I did pretty good. I got as far as the train station that goes to the airport before I turned around and came home. But this story has a happy ending. Now I can't really explain how I did it, how it happened, but after 10 years of fearing flying, I got back on the horse. A friend of mine asked me to visit Thailand, which is somewhere I'd always dreamed of going. And there was no logic, there was no reason why I couldn't or shouldn't go, except for that fear stopping me. And wanting to travel so much and being held back so long, I knew I just had to do it. And I jumped into the deep end. I got myself on that plane, flew myself solo, a long haul plane, long haul flight, telling myself over and over again that it was going to be okay. And it was. And after that initial flight, I've now taken another 32 of them. Visited 8 countries and 2 domestic locations. So now I've come back to where it all started. I can look forward again to taking plane trips. I can get that excitement, that thrill of taking off and landing. You could say that I'm cured, I guess, but it doesn't mean that it's easy every time I get on the plane now. I still have that niggling fear the whole time I'm on the plane. It doesn't stop till I get off. But at least I put myself in a situation and I get through it, I conquer it every time. And the rewards when I get to these new destinations are really totally worth it. Fear can be a difficult thing to live with. And I hope that in your life, any fears that you may carry around, you can also conquer them as I have done. Give yourself clearance to take off free of that fear and let yourself travel into the wild, blue, Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
What we were trying to achieve tonight. And by David Mudge, Into the Wild Blue Yonder was the title. David got up here and he started out, my seat is into the full upright position. And then I thought, well, not much variety there just yet. And then suddenly we came to a stop. Well, I still didn't get much variety again. But then, all of a sudden, he was pushed back into his seat and we were going at 300 kilometres an hour. So you can grab the rush. We started with our vocal variety. It's almost like you start off by lulling somebody into a sense of mild security with your nice conversational speech, and then all of a sudden the power switched on and bang, you're off. So that's kind of what I felt as we started the rush, and of course I sit in aeroplanes all the time, love it. So we were pushed back into our seats, and then the buildings started looking like little Legos as we took off. Lovely, it's a wonderful, it's like painting pictures as you take off, and I love that when you do it. We moved on to Love at First Flight. I love the way he said that. I actually felt the love in it. So the vocal variety is moving along. Guess what the next one was? And I like this one too. Dreaming of becoming a pilot. And he almost put me into a dream too. I'd actually dreamt of becoming a pilot myself. Move on. Then we changed tact. And I wasn't ready for this. Very slow, very intentional. We had unrational, uncontrollable fear. And I thought, wow, where is this leading us to? So you can see there is enormous variety in that one speech, the way we're going. And we're getting a picture almost with each phrase. Sort of like word pictures. Then we started moving into issues. He had a new fear out there. And he developed it after 9/11, which is almost, to me, like a 9/11 syndrome. Many people develop psychological consequences of that event. And I feel we have another speaker here who just might develop that as well. And so he had a new fear of flying. And he had to fly back, and he was trapped for 8 hours, suffered turbulence as well. I could feel that coming through with his words. And then we had trust as an issue in the body. And then we had a control issue, which he didn't have any control about. And this is getting to the real meat of the sandwich, and then he had to develop faith that he was actually going to get there. So the story turned right around, and to top it off, he got a job in the airline. So we're really turning the story over. So these are, tonight the speech, easy to understand ideas. Very clearly dictated to us. And what was really great about it was to grab us in. It was a personal story. Everybody wants to hear a personal story. And that worked really well. And it was a story like an epic. It was a whole round story of overcoming something, overcoming the fear, and getting back, bringing back life to itself, and starting to really enjoy life. I liked it, so we did really well in all those departments. The thing missing a little bit tonight was gestures. The gestures were entirely restricted tonight, unfortunately. And I guess tonight we were concentrating, really concentrating on the vocal variety. And we did a spectacular job of that. And I think that distracted because we weren't quite following the gestures as we would like to. So David fulfilled all the objectives tonight, did a great job. I enjoyed it, and he held my attention from start to finish. Mr. Toastmaster.